And then I come to the exam and thought, oh, I meant to ask someone about that. If you have a question, ask about it. Always ask. Always talk to people, have conversation. Always the last 100 right before I went into the exam. And I found that most of the questions that were coming up, because it says what bank it's originally from, most of them were ATPL Q. But even some of them that were maybe GS or AVEX. I am a modular student, meaning that I've not stayed at one school the entire time. I've skipped around the country and been to different schools and had tons of different instructors on different aircraft. So I'm not in any rush, but it's been working well so far. I'm happy with where I am. The reason that I'm modular is honestly lack of research on my part when I began. I came into it straight from school. So I found a university that did pilot training as a combined degree, and that just led on to like being modular because that doesn't suit integrated, or it didn't at the time. I think that being modular is a great opportunity because I got to tailor my course to what I needed, where I was at the time, to be as cost effective as I wanted it to be, because of course finances is a huge factor when you're learning to fly, and I just found that modular gave me more independence over what I was willing and able to spend at any given time on one thing, and also to go different places wherever I found that the aircraft and the instructors were most suited to what I wanted to do at that time, whether it be training or just privately hour building. After I've spoken to some airlines, I would say that there are no real disadvantages to being modular. When I began training, I was told that there are some airlines that may prefer integrated students for their own reasons, whether it be because it's from a more reputable school, or but there's rumours going around that maybe airlines prefer students to have stuck with one school to show loyalty perhaps, but having spoken to employers and recruiters, that's not the case, at least to who I've spoken to. There's as many opportunities out there for modular students as there are integrated. I've been training since autumn winter of 2019. When I started at the university course that I did, we had to do our private license within that first year. So I started alongside my degree, started training, but of course, end of 2019, start of 2020, for reasons that I'm sure we're all familiar with, I did have a 6-month break due to flying activities and schools being ceasing operation, if you will. I had about 15 hours at the start of 2019, but really full-time training I started around September 2020, and since then it's been almost non-stop. I have done my ATPL training with Leading Edge in Oxford. I've done it twice. And my experience with them has been extremely positive. They have these instructors that will explain the same thing in multiple different ways. There is no way that you will come out of ground school, I find, and still not understand something. Leading Edge itself is student orientated, and even as they've grown, they've still maintained this kind of environment that makes you feel like a human. And that's really important when you're going through such an enjoyable but at the same time stressful process. What I found really important not just for me, but for everybody else, not only in my class, but across the whole school, and people that I know who go to other schools have said the sizes of the classrooms. When I first started at Leading Edge, there were 7 people in my ground school class, and that meant that every single one of us had a relationship with each other as students in the class. There was no feeling of being judged in any way. If, they all say there's no such thing as a silly question, but you still feel like that sometimes. And then I came back and did ground school for a second time. There were 18 people in the class, and I could really feel the difference. It was still small enough and close-knit that we could still have those positives that I had in the 7-person class, but I could feel how if that class kept getting bigger and bigger, like it does at some ATOs, it wouldn't be a good environment for me personally, but maybe for some people it would. So that's something definitely to think about, is the sizes of the intakes. In the beginning, when I was there during COVID, it was in person, then online, back in person again. But for me personally, I can't do online learning. I have to be there, immersed in the environment, surrounded by people who have the same interests as I do to keep me engaged. So that's, I guess, another thing to think about when you're choosing your ATO and the course that you're on. Kahoot. Everyone loves a Kahoot. What I would do, we had either 2 or 3 classes a day, and I would come home every evening, go through my notes, pick out from the question bank what was the keywords, what's coming up, and then make a Kahoot. And then I'd invite my class round, or would just do it in the flat that I was living with, because I lived with the people that I was studying with. End of the week, let's do a Kahoot of everything we've done. And that was so helpful, because there's things that you might learn and then not come back to again until you see it on the question bank and think, I don't remember doing that. Just keep being aware of what's actually important. So speaking to people who've already done it, speaking to instructors, very important. The easiest subject for me, I think might come to no surprise to many students, is comms. Quite self-explanatory for a lot of it. You don't need to understand a lot of key concepts and difficult things, really. But I would say, even if something's easy, don't overlook it, because as I say, it's an average booster. Get that 100%. Don't settle for 75, ever. The hardest for me was definitely Principles of Flight, and I can back that up by saying that I failed it 3 times, and then I passed it on the 4th attempt. It depends on the person, but for me, it was the subjects where you really need to get into the concepts and understand it off the top of your head, because not only is it difficult, you don't have a lot of time in the exam to sit there thinking, I can't remember. So you need to know it. But equations, 3-step method, lifesaver. I found the 2 most difficult exams in terms of time was general navigation, flight planning, because so much content, so little time. I left all the chart work to the end, and I made a note which question requires which chart, so that I knew that I could just go to that chart and do all those questions at the same time, instead of getting a chart out, folding it up, another one, oh, I need to go back to that chart, waste time. What I did is I did that, and then all the wordy questions, on the screen you have a timer. If I spend more than 1 minute on a question, I think I'm not getting it, move on. Because who knows, you might answer some more questions, come back to that one, and it's jogged your memory of how to do it. That might not work for everyone, but manage your time how you think is most appropriate. Do practices beforehand, timed practices, put yourself under pressure. You don't want the first time that you're in that situation to be in the exam, because it's not going to work out. As I mentioned earlier, I went to Leading Edge. This means that we were always in there like in the school, in person, had a structured timetable every day. Also, I was living with the people who were in my class. So I would wake up maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, get ready, go see my friends in the kitchen, have breakfast. The bus would take us to the airport at 7:45. Classes began at 8:30. And now we had 2 different types of day because they would kind of stagger the lunch times. We would either have 3 lots of 2-hour lessons, or we would have 2 lots of 3-hour lessons. So we would either be studying 2 or 3 subjects in a day. And these would be kind of scattered throughout the week. So it would be kind of variety, a little bit of everything. And this would be from, 4:10 from 8:30? So maybe 8 hours, hour for lunch. And then 5-minute breaks, 5 to 10 minute breaks every hour. And then we had the VLE, virtual learning environment, where we would be scheduled study time. Now that wasn't enforced, but it was expected to do it as part of the mandatory hours that we have to do as part of the ATPL, because it said every day if you study this for this amount of time, should be all right. I ended up ignoring that. A lot of people didn't, and it worked for them. But I just found that if I do maybe an hour of one subject and an hour of another subject, 2 subjects that I hadn't been studying that day for variety, because short attention span, that worked. And it was just creating a sort of relaxed timetable, I guess, because I don't like a lot of routine generally. We had 2 to 3 months per module. We did it in 3 modules. And within a module, we'd have a progress test and then a school final before the actual exam. We'd always get to the progress test maybe a month into studying the subject, and then I would go into the question bank and I'd start doing all questions that were in the subject, not only had been seen, because I just wanted as much practice as possible with exam style questions. And then after the school finals, I would go into questions that have actually been seen and then start banking, trying to memorise anything that I just knew I wasn't understanding. I like to be able to filter by the authority. When it comes to you're doing that last minute banking, memorising the answers, you want to know what's been seen in that exam. Also important is having a comment section. It's useful to see other people's explanations, because a bank often has explanations themselves, but again, that's only one way of explaining something. It's important to have a comment section so that you're able to speak about the question with people who you might not normally interact with on a day-to-day life, and they might have a different way of explaining something that you've never heard of before. Yes, I used Airhead for 4 months. From right before my first module exam sittings all the way to the end of the 3rd, I used Airhead because I liked the idea of getting all of the banks in one subscription, really. I went to the filter screen, see what's been seen in exams, last 100, last 200, last 300. After this school final, I had a study week, and then always the last 100, right before I went into the exam. And I found that most of the questions that were coming up, because it says what bank it's originally from, most of them were ATPL Q. But even some of them that were maybe GS or AVEX, they came up in the exam that weren't in the ATPL Q bank. I found there were a lot of questions that came up in the exam that I found on Airhead, and actually a lot that I might have got wrong had I not seen them beforehand. So the only thing that I would have done differently is spoken to people more. As I said, I lived with the people I went to school with, but there were still some times that I thought, I'm not going to ask, I can figure it out on my own. And then I either got distracted, never figured it out, or just forgot, right? And then I come to the exam and thought, oh, I meant to ask someone about that. If you have a question, ask about it. Always ask. Always talk to people, have conversations. That is what I would do differently. Ask silly questions. Always ask silly questions. They're fun and useful. Don't take it too seriously. It'll get in your head and you'll think more, oh, this is something to be stressed about, therefore I'm going to be stressed out. No, have fun with it, right? Because it is fun. I did ground school twice. It was horrible, but I look back on it and I miss it. It's amazing. Go out on the weekends, have fun, de-stress, otherwise it's going to get too much. Just appreciate it for the experience that it is. It's incredible. If I could go back, I would. I don't want to, but I would.